I'm taking the team total. I'm taking first quarter, first half, full game, taking it all. OU all the way. I lost so much money on OU.
Whoa, he has trouble with the snap, and the ball is free. Can't start to all crazy.
And they run through our ass like shit through a tin horn, man.
That is a disgusting act by Randy Moss.
What is up, and welcome to not another CFB pod. This is the Week 8 college football, Week 7 preview and pick show. We've got a bunch of picks that we're going to be rolling out y'all's way, some in the weeds plays, some moneyline dogs, of course the pod parlay, which everyone loves. Beast, it's going to be an awesome weekend, man. How are we feeling?
I'm feeling great. I'm loving the positive vibes only sign stayed up because me and PG, we got hot last weekend. He had a big weekend on college football. I went 3-1 on Sunday with our NFL picks. So boys are putting out winners. Positive vibes are in the air. We just got to keep this going, man.
Yeah, got to find a way to keep the train rolling. So we're just going to stay positive right now. We're seeing the board, and that's one of the most important things you can do is just visually see the board well. And we're knocking that one out of the park. I got to looking at this slate we have for both college football and the NFL this weekend. It's going to be a good weekend of football. I'm going to miss some of it. I'm going to be at an Oktoberfest, which is going to be cool. They still have some TVs set up around. So if I can just get our group to kind of post somewhat near one where I can look and see, I'll still get some stuff out. But look forward to some Oktoberfest content for me this weekend. It should be a good time.
Hell yeah. PG's going to be a box score warrior on Saturday. He's going to be locked in. He'll have an Oktoberfest beer in his hand. Mm-hmm. He'll be other hand. We'll have some games probably streaming on his phone. I love to see it, man.
Yeah. YouTube TV for the win. Hopefully, if the signal's decent. This is a pretty big Oktoberfest. So, it's one of those ones where there's so many people there and it's all off of one tower. It's kind of hard to get good service sometimes. Let's get into the slate first. Let's talk about college football first. Obviously, we're getting a ways into the season. I said earlier, this is week 8, technically, for college football.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's just flying by right now. We had some good weekday games this week. The Thursday night ones, by the time people listen to this, have already happened, so we'll just skip to Friday. Not anything too exciting. It's kind of a sicko slate. Tulsa, Temple, UAB, Western Kentucky. Either of those games interest you at all, really?
You know what? Maybe in UAB, Kentucky, or Western Kentucky. I wouldn't necessarily say I'm super excited about the teams, but I want to say the total I'm looking at, 59 points. That's a game where even if I don't have a side, maybe I end up taking an over and just saying, well, fuck it, we're taking a Friday over. That's just always the move. But nothing that stood out that much, I would say.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's there's not much you can do with that. We do have a couple really interesting ranked matchups this week, ranked on ranked. I want to kind of hit on those, but since we've been kind of a Pac-12 podcast, let's hit on probably the biggest one in the Pac-12. UCLA, number 9, going to Oregon, taking on number 10 Oregon Ducks. This one's really interesting. I think I actually have a play on that one. I do have a play on that one. Very high total. I don't know if you've seen that. Do you have any thoughts on that game? I mean, it should just be a classic.
Yeah, it's going to be a total Pac-12 classic. 70.5 points is a total. It's just ridiculous. That's exactly what I want to see out of, a game with this much hype going into it. Oregon's looked great. So is DTR and UCLA. So I'm curious to see if DTR and UCLA can keep this kind of hot streak going on the road, going to Eugene. That's tough. So we'll see. I'm excited for that game. It's going to be a fun one. I don't have a play on it, but I might have to tell PG on this.
Oh, yeah. We've got a fun play cooked up for that one. That one will be good. The next game I noticed, just because it was right next to it, this is still in that 2:30 slot, but it's Oklahoma State at home taking on Texas. Oklahoma State obviously coming off of an overtime loss where they kind of played better. There's some news that looks like Spencer Sanders might not go. It's like his throwing shoulder or something. That's kind of why I think Texas is favored by 7 here, but should be a good one in Stillwater. Oklahoma State has kind of had Texas's number too, so it'll be an interesting one to watch, see if Quinn Ewers can keep up this start he's on.
Yeah, it was kind of weird entering that game last week. I heard there was a lot of rumors about Sanders not playing.
It was kind of a last-minute thing that he even played last week, yeah.
And then he played, and obviously, it was a close loss, but they might just be kind of thinking that, we're at home, if he can't go, we'll be all right. They're probably just thinking, Texas has had a couple of tough games this year. But I think this is a spot where Texas actually might come on the road and pop them. But I don't know.
Yep.
It's going to be an interesting side. So
they're favored by almost a touchdown. It might be a touchdown at the time that you're listening to this. But, yeah, I think the backup quarterback is Mike Gundy's son.
Really?
Oh, yeah, Gunnar Gundy or something like that. So you might get to see some of him. He was the quarterback for Stillwater High School, and they were pretty dang good. Like, he's a coach's kid. Like, he's good. I'm just not sure if he's, like, D1 good.
Right.
It might be interesting to see. Not that Texas's defense is just insane, but still, Power 5 football is different. We've got another ranked matchup going down. Clemson at home taking on undefeated 14 Syracuse. We like Syracuse. They run the ball really well. This might not be a great matchup for them, honestly. I think Clemson is nearly 14-point favorites in this one. Obviously, back at home. What are your thoughts on this one?
This one scares me so much in the sense that when I kind of was talking about it earlier this week, I said this doesn't make sense to me, like why this should be a 14-point spread. But I'm like, that almost makes me want to just hammer Clemson just for that thought is like everybody that sees that, undefeated Syracuse team is getting 14 points. Like, wait a minute. Like they should be getting like, a closer, matchup. I think you're right. I think Clemson might just kind of grind them right down into the dirt. And we kind of see one of those games where it feels like Syracuse should have covered, but Clemson just didn't allow any points kind of thing.
Yeah, it's just that it's stylistic, right? Like we know Syracuse loves to run that rock, and the best thing Clemson does is stop the run. That front seven is huge. Great athletes, 5 stars everywhere. It's going to be a tough matchup against Syracuse, who, they're good players, but it's a bunch of 3 stars coming in, guys that have just, they're older guys that have kind of been in the program. It's just a stylistic thing, and I don't know. I think Clemson may cover that number. I'm kind of with you, just in that 13.5 almost seems too much, so it makes you want to take Bama, or Clemson in this case.
Yeah, and the other thing with that is we think back a couple weeks ago when Clemson was at home and they played NC State.
Yep.
That was an ugly 30-20 win, and that was a 10-point win, and they held NC State to 20 points. I think NC State's probably better than Syracuse in certain senses. I mean, offensively, it's arguable, but still, the point is, if you only allowed 20 against NC State, I just feel like it's similar matchup-wise, like you said. I could see that same thing happening this week where they hold them to 17, 20, whatever the case, and they just get a 14-point win and get the job done.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably the most likely outcome. We've got another couple ranked games here. I'm scrolling down a little bit further, getting into the evening now. Mississippi State, number 24, going to Tuscaloosa to take on Alabama. Alabama coming off that loss last week at Tennessee. Going to be an interesting week for Bama, man. I know this is a pretty big spread. I think Mississippi State's the underdogs by 21 points-ish. But again, same kind of story. It's almost like Bama's favored by so much you want to take Bama. My issue with it is it's like week after week we keep saying, oh, like Nick Saban, this is the week they really stop somebody. Oh, no, this is the week. Oh, no. And like eventually we just got to be like, I don't know if it's going to happen, but this is a good spot for it if you're going to be back home. I think Mississippi State may be coming off a loss as well. And I don't know.
Against Kentucky.
Yeah, Kentucky. That's right. Kentucky shut them down good last week. So what are your thoughts on this one?
I'm with you exactly that. I think that it makes no sense that Bama should be 21-point favorites after how we've seen them play in a few games this year. And it's not just the game against Tennessee. Like we saw them have struggles against Texas. Like we saw them have some struggles a few times this year against A&M. It was 24-20. And I don't think A&M's very good. I know they have a defense, but the point here is that like Mississippi State, I know they didn't look outstanding against Kentucky, but it feels like they should be good enough to cover 21. I'm going to just stay away. This might be another one of those games where I just want to analyze, is Bama actually, a top 4 team? Because I don't know anymore, man.
Yeah, I know. And it's not like, I don't think it's Nick Saban losing his fastball. I heard a lot of people talking about this. It's really more that everyone else has kind of stepped their game up, right? Tennessee's starting to recruit at an insane level. Georgia's been recruiting at an insane level. Ohio State, USC, all are just taking 1 or 2 5-stars away from Nick Saban, and they're just not as deep as they used to be. Remember that receiving core they had a few years ago? It was like Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, Henry Ruggs, or whatever it was. It was like a whole
tons
list of guys, and it's just not that anymore. So it'd be interesting to see if he can get this team kind of to gel. Obviously, they've got still great pieces everywhere, still got an amazing roster, but will they figure it out? Because, like you said, so far hasn't been the same kind of looking team. We do have one more ranked matchup left I want to talk about. This is K-State going to TCU. This is number 17 versus number 8, going down at 7 p.m. Central. I would argue this is a borderline cold one classic, at least the second half. I think this could be a fun game. I know the total is only 54, but the spread's 3.5. I mean, this is going to come right down to the wire, I think. I'm interested to see if TCU can keep this kind of Cinderella run going. I do think they're a good team. They're obviously led by a quarterback that's been there in Max Duggan for 10 years now. He's been playing forever. And Adrian Martinez is the quarterback for K-State. He's been playing forever too, just not at K-State. So I don't know. I think it's a fun one. What do you think?
You make a great point that we have 2 quarterbacks that are just like the oldest quarterbacks in college football at this point. It makes you feel like, man, like I could have swore like the last time I watched these guys, the first time I watched these guys, I should say, like, man, like I don't even know if I could drink yet. Like I'm 25. I'm like, fuck, man. I feel like probably it's been not. But no, I started looking at that matchup, and I think you're spot on though too. I think it's gonna be a really fun game. I think they match up very well with, you could pick either side, and you could probably make an argument of TCU matches up well with K-State. K-State matches up with TCU, especially the fact that we always see K-State show up for these games. They always get up. But TCU, man, magical run. Got to like what Duggan's doing. I'm excited for that one. Fox Sports 1 classic,
Yeah. Those always seem to produce some wacky games late at night. The Fox Sports 1, just like the obscure channels. Want to hit on a couple of the top 5 games going down this week. Ohio State's at home against Iowa. I know that's like a 30-point spread, and I was really looking at taking Ohio State's team total over, but it's like 40. And like, first of all, Iowa just doesn't give you the ball enough times to score that many. I still think it could happen, but this is like a really high variance game. Ohio State's favored by 30, but the over-under is like 49 or something. Like it's just ridiculous. What do you think about it?
Oh, it's crazy to think that we have to look at this matchup and just expect that Iowa's not going to give us any points on that total. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think you're probably right that the team total would even be scary just because Iowa is so ugly and they'll run the ball in the fourth quarter down 30. Like they don't care.
Yeah.
They will do that. So that's a game that it'll be fun to see. Like if Ohio State can blow them out, I think it'll make me feel a little bit more confident that Ohio State's like your Big Ten front runner. Because there's a lot of discussion after last week that, Michigan's going to keep up. And I'm like, I don't know. Like Michigan, we kind of gave them a lot of credit for beating up on Iowa. If Ohio State lays an even bigger number, like what do we think
then
now?
we're kind of back at square one where we were. I agree. I've heard a lot of that talk that Michigan should be ranked ahead of Ohio State. And I do think it's a little unfair just that, Michigan went up there and just put up numbers against Penn State last week. And we immediately went, oh, okay, well, Penn State's not very good. It's like that does suck a little, but it's just, that happens to you, especially when you're a team that, let's be honest, a lot of people hate them. They're like Texas, if you're not one of their fans, you probably are one of their haters. That's just kind of how it works. So I'm sure their fans are kind of used to that at this point. So, but for now, I like Ohio State. I think Ohio State's ceiling's higher, but Michigan's looked good last week. They're on a bye this week, I believe. So they definitely won't be jumping Ohio State this week. Tennessee's got an absolute cupcake. UT Martin coming to town. We don't have to talk about that one at all. It's one of those classic SEC cupcake games. There's an interesting game kind of off the wall, but it's an AAC game. Cincinnati, number 21, at SMU this week. One I really wanted to take, but SMU's just been so up and down for me. Don't know what to think about them. Cincinnati's been in some dogfights too. Did you look at that game at all?
I did. I was really looking at SMU. I think I wanted to bet SMU just off of like the public percentages and everything. But I've been really high on Cincinnati all year. Like that was a team that entering the year, I was like, hey, like I wouldn't be surprised if they ran it back, as far as, maybe not necessarily making the CFP, but like winning the AAC. And like, I just thought they're probably going to get a really high bowl game. And I'm not saying that's off the table now. But I mean, I would have expected going into the year that they would have blown out SMU, but I actually think like SMU keeps up. It's kind of a game I was so scared about because I was like, I'm so high on Cincinnati for the year, but SMU, this is a good matchup. I think it really is.
Yeah. Stylistically, that's going to be an interesting one. It's in that 11 a.m. slot, so I'll find a way to tune in somehow. At least check box scores quite regularly. We got one more game I guess I want to talk about, unless you've got another. I want to talk about Minnesota at Penn State. This is the Penn State whiteout game on ABC. Should be electric, but crazy thing is, a lot of people on Minnesota, they like the way that run game, after seeing what Michigan's run game did to you. And I am curious too, is there any kind of body blow effect from playing Michigan? Those big boys, the big offensive line pushing you around, immediately turn around and play another physical team in Minnesota. But Minnesota kind of, they had a bad loss or two, but they still have Mo Ibrahim. What are your thoughts?
I have a play on this game, so I don't want to give away too much of what side I'm going to be on. But you're right, just 7:30 game on ABC. Like, it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have a good breakdown for that game.
Great. Well, our Big Ten guy, do you have any more college games you want to talk about before we flip over to the NFL?
Not necessarily. I think we're going to probably go through any games that I might have been thinking about, between you and I having plays. So exactly. I think we'll have a good recap, man.
Yeah, we covered all the top 5 teams, all the ranked head-to-head matchups, and any kind of big ones that I thought was thinking about. Yeah. Before we jump into the NFL slate, let's talk about our sponsor. The BetCoda Sportsbook is a South Dakota-owned and operated sportsbook located in the Midnight Star Casino in Deadwood, South Dakota, serving customers in the state. As you enter the Midnight Star, you are swept into the past with the grand staircase, stunning woodwork, and the elegance of the chandelier. They offer the best lines in Deadwood, so stop by and mention the Coda Sports Gambling Network to receive a free BetCoda t-shirt. Play responsibly, must be 21 years or older to wager. Gambling problems or concerns? Call 1-800-522-4700. Shout out to the Coda Capper Gambling Network, man. It's been fun, and today they tweeted out kind of the standings for college football and NFL, and me and you are right there in the top of both of those. That's pretty cool. Hard work pays off. Let's talk about this NFL slate. A pretty interesting one, in my opinion. We got to start off by talking about our team squaring off in Dallas. The Lions coming to the Cowboys. Cowboys currently favored by 7, over under of 49. Now, I do have a play for this game, but I'm excited just because it's like our teams, It's kind of fun.
Oh, yeah. I thought about wearing like a Lions jersey on the podcast this week just to kind of, rep my team. That's good. That's going to be a fun game. I actually do have a play on that game. I won't necessarily say spread, total, what we're doing here, but it's going to be a blast. And I think it's good too, because my expectations are like low entering the game.
Yeah.
So it's not like, like early in the season when I was kind of thinking the Lions might be decent and they played the Vikings, like me and all the other guys at the Coda Sports Gambling Network, like a lot of Minnesota fans, and it was just kind of violent in the group chat of just like, damn, like the Lions just finally they like choked that game away, and like I had to kind of just kind of curl away into a corner, but there was a lot of shit talking going on. I don't have as much expectations. So, like, if the Lions get their ass kicked, it isn't that big. But
yeah. Okay. So, also in that noon slot, we've got the pesky Falcons, or what we call them, the frisky Falcons, taking on the Bengals in Cincinnati. I know you got to play on that, so I'll just skip that game. Colts Titans in Tennessee. I don't really have much to say about that. I just think that's a weird division, but it is a big game in the division with both teams being 3-2. So that will be a big game. Titans are only favored by 2.5, but the over-under is 42, so they expect it to be a little sloppy of a game. It's going to be windy kind of all weekend, basically across the middle of the United States. So look for that a little bit when you're handicapping some of these over-unders. Packers Commanders, I think that's interesting just because I know we've got what is the Taylor Heineke is going to be the quarterback for the Commanders.
Yeah.
Packers have been an absolute free fall. You got any thoughts on that game?
I don't know what to think from the Packers anymore, man.
I
Every
know.
time I think that I'm like, oh, this is the week Aaron Rodgers does this whole thing where he has everybody doubt him and then he comes back. Every time I've said that, like they're just not getting any better. So
Right.
it's just like week after week, like their best win right now is a win over the Bears on like Monday Night Football earlier this season or Sunday Night Football, whatever it was. And that was like the Bears stink. So
Yeah.
I guess they beat Tampa Bay. I'll give them credit for that. But still, like they haven't looked outstanding all year, and everybody said, wow, they might win the NFC. I don't think so. They're 3-3, dude.
Well,
they might not even win the division. Like,
yeah, they've got. I mean, Minnesota's got a pretty good lead on them right now. But what I was going to say is when the Packers did beat the Bucks, that was the week that the Buccaneers had no receivers, if I'm not mistaken. All their receivers were on injured. So yeah, I don't know either. The Bucks are taking on the Panthers, NFC South matchup. Not too much to say there. I think Bucks are not great, and the Panthers are obviously 1-5. They're absolutely reeling. Giants, Jaguars, two kind of frisky teams going at it. This line's crazy because the Jags are the home team, but the Jags are favored by 3. At 2-4, they're favored over the 5-1 Giants by 3. It's an interesting line.
Very weird line, and you'd think, like we said, that the Giants at 5-1 would be the better team. I guess there's maybe an expectation that, Jacksonville is going to kind of get this going, but yeah, I'm not sure. I had to stay away from it because you're right. Such an ugly line. It just feels like Vegas knows something.
Yep.
And sometimes when Vegas knows something and I don't, I'm like, what's the secret that I'm missing out on?
Yeah,
like, I don't know.
Yeah. Who knows, man? I don't have a play on that game either. I just thought the line was interesting. We got Browns at Ravens this weekend. What is that? AFC North matchup. Always fun, but honestly, the Browns with Jacoby Brissett, hard to watch. And the fact that their defense just hasn't been what I thought they would be so far. Maybe that all changes as we go because, like we said, still early in the year, technically. Then we move on to that 305 slot. We've got the Jets going to the Broncos. This is another interesting line because the Broncos are 2-4. The Jets are 4-2, but the Broncos are actually favored in this game. It's right around even, but still kind of interesting.
Oh, I think the Jets roll them. I don't have a play on it, but if anybody's listening, like I do think that Denver I've said it all year. I don't think they're coached well.
Yeah.
I don't think Russell Wilson is the same Russell Wilson we're used to. I think they're still, even after all this time, getting steam because their quarterback is Russell Wilson. Like everybody's like, oh yeah, Broncos, like, Russell Wilson, like they got all this going. Yep. I just like roster wise, like the Jets might actually have like a better, they probably have some better position players at certain, so I don't know. I think the Jets are rolling right now. I'm not really sure why I wouldn't take them in this slot,
Yeah.
Maybe I'll add it on. Who knows?
That's kind of what I'm thinking is kind of play it out and see if like maybe there's some injury news that we don't know about and then kind of dial it in. Also in that 305 time slot, kind of a gross one, the Texans at the Las Vegas Raiders. But I don't really have much for that game. Seahawks at Chargers. That's an NFC West matchup. No, it's not. It's just a West matchup. I did it again. Those two divisions, I just intermingle all the teams all the time. Chargers don't really even feel like an AFC team to me most of the time. I don't know what it is. Also in that 3 o'clock slot, maybe the most exciting game in this slot, Chiefs at 49ers. And the Chiefs are 2.5-point favorites, but interesting spot. What do you think about it?
Very weird line because when I look at the Chiefs, I think, man, like this offense is rolling so much. But then when I look at San Francisco, my whole thoughts on them is just this defense, like that's just their thing. So it's going to be a battle of arguably the best offense in the league. Maybe the Bills might be up top, but like top 2 offense, I'd probably say with KC. And then, in my opinion, the number 1 defense. So it's going to be a very fun matchup. Don't have a play on it, but very weird spread only being 2.5 because KC feels like they've been, beating everybody up until last week,
Right. And that was the Bills. So it's like,
yeah, right.
And they were right there with them. I mean, it took a last minute drive from Josh Allen. So yeah, then we move on to Sunday night, Steelers at Dolphins. Miami's favored by 7. Tua's back. I'm excited to see Tua back because I picked him up in fantasy. I needed a backup QB, so he was sitting there, and I'm glad he's playing because I need him this week. But any thoughts on this game?
Not necessarily. That's probably going to be a game I lock into. If I can find it on TV or through a streaming service, I'll be watching it. I wouldn't necessarily say it's the prettiest matchup, but it'll still be all right. So I'll be watching it. I think I got a couple guys going in fantasy, so yeah. I'll be kind of watching in the background, but maybe not the best game.
Yeah, and then Monday night we get an absolute stinker: Bears Patriots. The Patriots favored by 7.5. I think Mac Jones is back this week. Is that news correct, or am I off?
He should be, I believe, but I kind of I don't know what their thoughts are if they're going to go with him or Zappy. Maybe if he does come back, he'll be on a short leash. I haven't heard an official injury report, but it might be in by the time this podcast comes out. So we'll see.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's all I had on the NFL slate. If you have any final thoughts on it before we talk about some picks.
Yeah, no, I'm ready to get into it, man.
Ready to get into it. Let's get in the weeds, my guy. In the weeds plays. Mine lost last week. It was one of my only losses. I had the over with like Eastern Michigan or somebody, and I think there was 6 field goals attempted and only like 4 were made. So that's like as bad as you can get for an over. But I'm gonna let you go first with the in the weeds play, and then I'll follow you up.
For sure, we're gonna go with probably one of my favorite, non-Power 5 teams, to bet on. Unfortunately, this isn't like a late game that we're going to be betting on. This is a 4:00 Saturday game, and that will be Hawaii +5 at Colorado State. Like I said, typically they're playing in that midnight slot, but it doesn't matter. The Rainbow Warriors are going to be going this week. I just think Colorado State, they might be the worst team in the Mountain West. There's some bad teams in the Mountain West, I'll be honest, but I think Colorado State might be one of the worst ones. It doesn't feel like Hawaii should be getting 5 points to me. It just feels like this game is much more of a pick 'em. Hawaii, while they're not good, are going to be playing another bad Colorado State team. So you're going to give me 5 points in a game that I think should be a pick 'em. That's a very big gap between where I'm putting it and where Vegas is putting it. I'm going to take the 5 points here. Just feels like one of those games, like we always say with these in the weeds, where Vegas isn't putting a lot of focus on it. Who cares about Hawaii, Colorado State? Typically, nobody's going to be betting it except for sickos. So they're probably not monitoring the line as much. That's where we get that 5-point advantage. I think Hawaii, frankly, they could win this game. I think it's a pick 'em for me.
Yeah, I was looking at that game too, and that's kind of what I came away with is Hawaii's finally got something going. And I think, I don't know, Colorado State's just a mess. So I don't hate that at all. I'm going to go to my in the weeds play and buckle up because we're going to be taking some points here. North Texas at UTSA. I'm going over 72.5 in this game. This is a bit of a public over, but it's 62% of the bets and 88% of the money. I love having that money edge. That's a big edge for me. Both these teams are 5-2 on overs this year. We've talked about UTSA and what they're doing with their offense. Frank Harris is a dual threat guy. They've really figured this offense out. Now, they didn't have the greatest result against FIU, but this was at FAU midweek. Crappy, travel, crappy, field to be on. They didn't exactly dial in for that one. On the other hand, North Texas's offense has really figured it out. Scored 45 and 47 in the last 2, and those are both conference games. These two teams played last year. The final score was 45-23, so that's over easily. I just think both these offenses, they're both top 5 in pace of play, and that just means plays per minute, basically how fast they go. Both these teams go really fast. Going to be a ton of plays. Even if the offenses aren't clicking in the first half, stay with it because we're just going to be running so many plays. The defenses are going to get tired. It's a lot of points. We got to have a lot of things go our way. We got to be scoring 7 when we get down in the red zone. Over 72.5 is my play, North Texas and UTSA.
That's a perfect game because not only it's going to be in the weeds, so people probably weren't looking at it, but even if they didn't care about North Texas or UTSA, there's so many points that you have to watch that game at that point. Know it's going to be an electric game, even though you don't probably know a single player on those teams, names. People are going to be I don't know who these guys are, but they're scoring points. So it'll be entertaining, and that's all we want. So Are we
That's
ready to
right.
move to best bets here?
I think we are. I was just gonna say that's kind of what you want out of your in the weeds plays. Is at least it's something exciting to watch.
Oh, yeah.
My over last week was not very exciting. So let's get into best bets, and I'll let you lead this one off too.
All right. We're going to go with a game that, people are going to doubt me. They're going to say, Beast, I don't get it. But we're going to take LSU minus 1.5 at home versus a 7-0 Ole Miss team. People are going to be like, wait a minute, Ole Miss hasn't lost. I get it. But I think that LSU last week, if you didn't watch how they played in that game against Florida, they looked awesome. Jaden Daniels might be peaking. Like, this might be as good as Jaden Daniels gets. 358 passing yards last week, 3 passing touchdowns, 44 rushing yards, and 3 rushing touchdowns. I'm not necessarily saying Ole Miss's defense and Florida's defense are equivalent, but I think Jaden Daniels is playing the best ball that he's had, or, probably played in college, between Arizona State and LSU now. Brian Kelly kind of has figured some things out. I don't think this LSU team is like outstanding, but at home, I do think that they're going to be able to kind of do some stuff, get the crowd behind them. The crowd's going to be there in a 7-0, against a 7-0 team. They're going to be fired up. They want to see, they want to see their guys come out and maybe pop off, an undefeated team. I think minus 1.5, it seems so illogical that they would beat the undefeated team that we're going to take it. I think they actually play really well in this game, and I think they pull it off. I see them covering this one minus 1.5.
Okay, I like it. I like it. You've been on LSU, and like you said, it might be the right time to do it just because, it's what else are you going to get from Jaden Daniels? He's kind of a guy we've seen, but right now playing really well. I'm going to go to a play here that I'm pretty excited about. It's a Big 12 play, 11 a.m. I'm taking the Baylor Bears minus 9.5 over Kansas. I saw what I needed to see from Kansas last week, and if you look at it, they've played 2 tough games back-to-back, TCU and then OU, and now they're traveling down to Waco. They've kind of been doing this yo-yo, traveling to Texas, back up, Oklahoma, back, all this travel, and that kind of wears on you. They don't have their starting quarterback, and you're right, they did kind of hang with OU last week, but the difference is Baylor's defense isn't going to give up that many explosive plays. I don't think their defense is great, but it's good enough to where they're not going to get those big bomb plays down the field like they did against OU that kept them in the game. Blake Shapen looks good to go in this one, and he's really got the offense going when he's playing. They suffered back-to-back heartbreaking losses. Remember, they were at West Virginia. I think that was a Thursday night game in West Virginia. So they've had a couple extra nights to kind of get rested. It's almost like a mini bye week in that way. Had a little more time to watch Kansas Jayhawks. I think they match up really well here. And so I'm going to go with the Baylor Bears minus 9.5. Even if this is at 10, which is kind of the direction it's moving in, I still like it. So,
all right. I like that a lot. I think that's a very good look on that game. And that's going to be probably a pretty highly watched game in a certain sense if you're a Big 12 fan. So
yeah,
I like that a lot. I'm glad we got to play on that game. We're going to move to Arizona State and Stanford. This game is not a great game. We're going to take the under 54.5 specifically because of that. I just think at 2-4, both these teams 2-4, they are 2 very mediocre mid teams. Stanford, 24 points per game scoring. Arizona State, 24.2 points per game scoring. Both of those are like outside of the top 80 scoring in the country right now. So I just think these offenses kind of stink. I'm not saying their defenses aren't really are very good, I should say. So, some people might say, well, wait a minute, their defenses are so bad, they'll be able to allow points. I just don't think they have the offenses to really fire up 55 points in this game. And Stanford just last week, while they had a nice win over Notre Dame, it was a 16-14 win over Notre Dame. I mean, that was a stink fest. I just think this is your classic 24-21 type finish. 2-4 Pac-12 teams, just not very good matchup here at all. I think under 54.5 is a great look. I don't think these offenses have anything to offer. We're going to go under here.
All right. I like a good under between 2 teams that aren't very good.
Yeah.
Like maybe other teams scored against them well, so they've hit some overs, but the difference is it wasn't their offense that made it go over.
Yep.
So I like plays like that. I'm going to go to a play. It's kind of a mid game too. West Virginia at Texas Tech. Both teams 3-3. I'm going with the Texas Tech Red Raiders at home here, -6. Coming off a bye week, it's just a good spot. West Virginia coming off in a very emotional game that they had to have at home versus Baylor. They pulled out last second. heroics everywhere. I'm sure Morgantown was crazy. Now they travel all the way down to West Texas, take on these Red Raiders. It's a hard place to play already, but coming off a bye week, these fans are going to be into it. They kind of believe in this team. I know the team's not been great yet, but I think the fans see signs that it's moving in the right direction. I expect there to be quite a home field advantage here. We're looking at 56% of the bets on the Texas Tech spread, but 77% of the money. I always like those big money differences. It's always a good sign. Nothing too special about what Texas Tech is doing, but I think coming off a bye week, they're going to have time to solve issues on both offense and defense. West Virginia's they're good on offense when they can get I'm just say Daniels because I can't remember his first name right now. Their quarterback Daniels, when they can get him settled in, he can hit some guys. But I think Texas Tech will surprise you. Their front four is actually pretty decent. And I just like the Red Raiders home field advantage here coming off of a bye week. So I'm going to go with them -6 over the Mountaineers.
I like it. We're sticking kind of in like the Big 12. I like that a lot.
I think those are my only two Big 12 plays, but they're just
all right.
back-to-back.
Hey, you know what? He had to get his Big 12 segment in for the show. I love it.
OU's on a bye week. Like I don't get to talk about OU this week. So
I love it. Same thing here, man. Michigan State on a bye week. So I got to get my Big 10 segment in here. We're going to go right into Minnesota +4.5 at Michigan State. Straight up here, Minnesota's bread and butter is the rushing game. Everybody knows that they're number 17 in the country right now, 212 rushing yards per game. And guess what? Penn State clearly had some massive issues against the run last week. 418 rushing yards allowed to Michigan. That is an extremely high number. I could not believe that when I looked at the box score after that Michigan-Penn State game. 418 rushing yards allowed. That says a lot about Michigan's running game, but it also says that Penn State's rushing defense that everybody talked about so much entering last week was probably a little bit overrated, and they had a very weak schedule entering that game. So they finally faced a team with a good running attack, and they got kind of exposed. Meanwhile, we have Sean Clifford a bit banged up. We had to see him leave the game with a right shoulder injury. He kind of came back in. But in the same sentence, the Penn State fans, I see them on Twitter. They want Drew Aller in there. There's a quarterback controversy in the fan base. Sean Clifford with that banged up right shoulder is not going to be 100% right. You can feel the pressure from the fans. I just think this is way too many points for this matchup. +4.5. Minnesota is coming off a tough loss to Illinois. I think it's a perfect spot to buy low on them. And I think they actually might even win this game against Penn State.
Yeah, I like it, man. I like my guy Mo Ibrahim.
Let's go.
As I like to call him. I'm going to a really exciting game for my next best bet. This is the UCLA Bruins at the Oregon Ducks. I'm taking the over 71 here. That's about where it's at right now. I think I locked in 70.5, but 71, that's a huge number, but I'm fine with it. Listen, Oregon is 4-2 to the over, and UCLA is 5-1. But what I want to focus on more is that Oregon's 3-0 at home to that over. That means Bo Nix plays a lot better at home when he doesn't have that crowd yelling in his ear, because we've all seen it. Like, he can have a quote-unquote Bo Nix game where he just throws a bunch of picks. But what I want to focus on is both these offenses are averaging over 500 yards per game. They both have a really good tempo. And both these defenses, they're fine, but they're not like great defenses. Both of them giving up around 350 yards a game. So they're susceptible as well, obviously. So I'm really looking forward to this game. Over 71. It's a high number. Both these offenses average over 41 points a game, though. And the defenses, like I said, are nothing insane. I expect both these offenses to have some success. And like I said, tempo. And these coaches are smart enough to know that's just how this game's going to go. You're not going to sprinkle magic fairy dust over your defense if you play slow, and then maybe Oregon has a chance to get a stop or two. Like, you keep doing what you do best, which is go fast, play vertical. It's going to be a bunch of scoring in this game, bunch of touchdowns. It's the perfect over, 70.5.
All right. I like that a lot. We said that total is real high, and that's the kind of stuff I like to see out of Pac-12.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to stick in the Pac-12, actually. This is my last college best bet. And this is a game that I actually ended up giving it out as my CFB Central, like, upset of the week, which is, we do a game where it's a 7-point, underdog or more. And I'm going to be taking Cal +7.5 at home versus Washington in this spot. I think the spread's an even better look than the money line, of course. But Cal 3-0 at home. Washington is 0-2 on the road. And I know everybody remembers the game against Michigan State where Washington went off, and a couple games early in the season where they looked great, but they've lost 2 out of their last 3. And even in their win over Arizona last week, they gave up a lot of points to Arizona. Their defense seems to have some major flaws. I think this is a perfect spot to kind of buy low on Cal. After that Colorado loss that they had last week, everybody's going to look and say, wait a minute, they lost to Colorado. Colorado's trash. No. Like, that was an ugly game. It wasn't their best showing. Cal's defense is surprisingly actually kind of okay. For a Pac-12 defense, like, they're not that bad. They've shown up in some games. I'm not saying they're going to, absolutely shut down Washington and hold them to no points, but at a 7.5 point spread, I just need them to keep it within 7.5. I think they probably could kind of pull off kind of one of those ugly upset wins at home. Like I said, this wouldn't shock me, but 7.5 points is a perfect spot. Buy low on these guys right now after that loss to Colorado. I think they keep this game closer than expected with how Washington's defense has looked.
Yeah, something's broken with Washington's defense right now. It's nothing like it was to start the year. I'm going to go to the NFL now. I've got 2 NFL plays. I've got the over 49 in the Detroit-Dallas game. It's me and Beast's teams. We might as well enjoy an over. Dak's back this week for the Cowboys. As we know, the Lions defense, specifically pass defense, is a little susceptible, and I think they're going to get it on track. Dak's receivers are all healthy. This offense, this should be a glimpse into what it can be. And the Lions, on the other hand, I actually think that they could have learned a lot if they were watching that Cowboys-Eagles game from last week. There's plenty to take away. Our guy, DeAndre Swift, I believe, is going to play in this one. I don't know if that's official news yet. You can tell me if it is or not. But I just think Goff's good enough. They're going to have a bounce-back game. I know what happened to them against New England was ugly, but you got to look into it. Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's going to be back in this one as well. He was missing some of those weapons the last time he was out there. I like them to get right coming off this bye. I actually think more than likely the Lions cover the spread, but I can't take that bet. So I'll just take hashtag Lions overs, over 49 in the Cowboys-Lions game. Lock it in.
I like it a lot, man. But, I can take that Lions plus 7.
No.
So I'll go to my first NFL play. We're taking Lions plus 7 at the Cowboys. Once again, it's hashtag too many points. I just feel like everybody probably looked at the last 2 weeks with the Lions, where they lost that shootout with Seattle. What an ugly game that was. We saw how bad that Lions defense can be, so I think your over is a great play. But they watched that game, and then they obviously watched New England just absolutely shut them out. But they had the bye week last week. The coaching staff had to have said, listen, boys, you guys just lost 2 really, really bad games. You guys got to get it right, especially the offense. I think you're right. I think Jared Goff, I think DeAndre Swift, if he's playing, I think Amon-Ra, all those guys, I think they kind of get things going. And when you're giving me a 7-point spread in the NFL, I don't care how good you think the Cowboys are, whatever. Dak might have some first game, rust kind of coming back. Anybody that thinks Dak's just going to come back and just absolutely probably light it up, I'm not necessarily with them. I think they'll still be able to score points because the rushing game is going to run all over Detroit. But I don't think Dak's going to be able to, just absolutely light it up. I think this is going to be one of those games where the Lions kind of can hang around for a long time. And then Dallas probably pulls away. But 7 points is still going to be one of those games where whether it's a backdoor cover, whether it's just kind of a 6 point, whatever, a 4 point, whatever. I just think that the Lions offense is good enough. I'm going to take them. I might regret this next Monday when we're doing our recap show. And I'm like, PG, I'm sorry that I doubted your team. But I think the Lions, they've been scrappy outside of the last 2 weeks. We saw them play very, very good against Philadelphia. And people forget that happened. And then we saw them play very good against a Minnesota team. They should have won that game against Minnesota. Right. We look at Minnesota as, they're the NFC North leaders right now. They're kind of looking pretty solid. So they've looked good in their first 3 games of the year, and then they just looked so off the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, the bye week might have came at the perfect time there for them, I think. I mean, give those guys time to kind of heal a little bit and kind of get back together on the same page. I'm going to go to my last NFL play. I'm taking the under 43 in the Giants and Jacksonville Jags. I think both these defenses are a little underrated, and both these offenses they stumble a lot. They'll have 2 or 3 or 4 first downs in a row where you're like, okay, and then they got a punt from the 50. It's a lot of shooting themselves in the foot. We've seen a lot of unders in general this year. It's going to be great weather, obviously, in Jacksonville. It's going to be a little warm, but other than that, it's a beautiful day in Florida almost always. I just think Trevor Lawrence, man, he's had some shaky starts as of late. They're going to try to lean on Saquon, the Giants are, I think, in this one. Just run the ball. That clock's going to stay moving. Maybe settle for a couple field goals here and there because of that reason I said earlier. So I'm just going under 43 in the Giants-Jags game.
I like that a lot. I think the Jags defense is actually probably better than they've shown in a couple of the weeks recently. Yeah. I've been impressed by them. Like the Jags just is like a whole this year. I know they've dropped a couple games recently, but it is what it is. I think you're right. Saquon will kind of be the focal point of that Giants offense, so I think that game could for sure go under. And that's a team that we've kind of been betting on a lot this year. So between like the Jaguars. So we're going to kind of go to another team with Falcons plus 6.5. Another one of these, pesky Jags, the frisky Falcons.
Yeah.
Falcons 6-0 against the spread. Like if you guys have been betting this team this year, you guys know exactly what I'm about to say to you, which is that they fight in every single one of their games. They just had a really, really nice win over the San Francisco defense that I talk so much about. Plus 6.5. I get that the Bengals are like the, reigning Super Bowl, runner-ups, but the Falcons, they should be able to hang on in this game. Same kind of situation where I talked about with Detroit. I just think that whether it's the Falcons or whether it's the Lions, like these are teams that kind of like to hang around. I think the Falcons and Mariota have really been finding ways to be able to put up points on even the best defenses in the league, like San Francisco. So if they can hang around and put up points on San Francisco's defense, I have confidence they can put it up on the Bengals defense, and the Bengals offensive line is still trash. So we're going to take the Falcons plus 6.5.
Yeah, the way I see that game going is the Falcons tie it late, and then the Bengals come down and kick a game-winning field goal as time expires. Everybody's happy.
Yep.
The Falcons, I think, would then be the first team to start 7-0 against the spread, if I'm not mistaken. So that's pretty cool. Be a pretty cool run. Do you have another pick here before we move on to Moneyline?
Yeah, so I got one more. Once again, we're going to stick with the same theme. I've just been taking a lot of these NFL, underdogs with a lot of points. And ironically, they're all on the road. So we're going to take Seattle Seahawks plus 6 on the road against the Chargers. Seattle fresh off a nice win over the Cardinals last week, 19-9, very ugly game, but that's besides the point. On the other hand, the Chargers have not really been that good. Like the Chargers, in my opinion, yes, they've been winning games, but when you look at like the box score of these games, I'm going to pull it up real quick here. They've just been kind of getting by. Like they beat Cleveland 30-28. They beat Denver, who I think Denver stinks, 19-16. Like these aren't pretty wins, and it doesn't make me feel like they should be 6-point favorites over Seattle. So I'm going to ride with Seattle, a Seattle team that, once again, another team kind of just hangs around. They don't really get too far down. Even against, Arizona, they beat my Lions. Like they just hung around that whole game against the Lions, and finally just kind of, they pull it off. So I think Seattle's a really good look with plus 6. A lot of road underdogs this week is my trend, but a lot of points as well. So once again, hashtag too many points, man.
I like it. Frisky Falcons, these teams that we're just going to the well right now. Let's talk about money line dogs. I'm excited about my money line dog, but should you lead this one off or should I lead this one off?
No, you know what? Lead this one off because I just hammered away 2 plays.
That's true. Let me get one in. Okay, so I'm looking at the Packers-Commanders game. I'm going with the Commanders money line at home. Taylor Heineke going back to the place, where it all started. He had a magical run there with the Commanders. Well, then I think they were the football team at the time, but he's just kind of a dog, and I think he's the kind of guy that this team rallies around. On the other hand, the Packers, as we said in the breakdown, we don't know what we're going to get from them on a game-to-game basis. I'm getting a lot of points here. Money back. This is Washington plus 185, so that's pretty nice. And I think in general, this game's a toss-up with it being who knows what we're going to get out of Aaron Rodgers. Doesn't really have any weapons right now. The Commanders, their offense just can't go 3 and out a whole bunch because if they do, it's going to be a blowout. I mean, you can't keep asking this defense to get out there because they're getting more and more injured. However, that front 7 is still pretty darn solid for these Commanders. I don't think the Packers are just going to be able to run it freely on them, which means they're going to have to just load up and pass it every down. And I like the DB's chances against these kind of subpar receivers that the Packers have right now. So I'm gonna go with the Washington Commanders plus 185 at home. Kind of a shocker. I guess it's an upset, but it's not the biggest upset ever. So I like it at 185.
I think that's a really good number. Mine's probably not as much of a plus 185. We're gonna roll with the plus 135 here. I'm gonna take Boise State plus 135 on the road against Air Force. Listen, Boise State's won 4 of the last 5 against Air Force. I think this is always one of those games that they, enter and they have a really good read on kind of how to go up against Air Force and, in their wacky, triple option offense. But Boise State, I was really high on them entering the year just in general. I thought that they would probably be like second in the Mountain West is what I ranked them when I did my preview earlier this year. In the last 2 weeks, they've kind of shown exactly what I expected. Like they looked really awesome. They're actually 3-0 in the Mountain West right now. So it kind of makes me feel like maybe they kind of weren't doing so good in their non-conference and they're finally heating up, 3-0 in the conference. And then we look at Air Force. Yes, they've been double-digit favorites twice this year and lost outright. So that makes me feel like maybe Air Force, while they've had some really nice wins this year too, they've also had some games where they just really, kind of lay an egg in big spots. And I think Boise State is too good of a team to enter this game and not be prepared. So I think they're very well prepared in this game. I could see them pulling off an upset. I want to say they're 3 or 3.5 point underdogs. So we're going to take plus 135 there. I think there's a really good shot. Boise State has not shown us everything that they have. And if this game was played in like week 10 or whatever, they might actually be favored in this game. So I'm going to take Boise State plus 135.
Yeah, I don't hate that at all. We just don't know what to expect from Air Force on a week-to-week basis. 1 week they're awesome. The next week they lose to freaking Wyoming or whatever it is. I mean, yeah, that's a good look. Let's talk about our last segment before we close out the show, the Pod Parlay. We're just going to take 2 of our favorite plays for the weekend and kind of combine them together. I'm going to let Beast go first with his, and then I'll follow it up.
All right. This is going to be a play I was on already, in my best bet. So I'll kind of keep it brief. We're going to take Minnesota plus 4.5 at Penn State. Yep. Once again, I kind of hammered home that I think Minnesota's bread and butter is that rushing game. Number 17 in the country, 212 yards per game. Penn State, ton of issues last week against the rushing game. PG made a great point that I didn't even mention in my picks, so I'm glad that he mentioned it. And he goes, maybe, Penn State's their defensive line, I should say, gets a little bit kind of banged up in that game against Michigan last week. And I think that Minnesota has a nice offensive line. They have a really good rushing game. I think those big boys on that Minnesota offensive line might be able to kind of push, Penn State's defensive line around. Add in Sean Clifford banged up a bit. We like Minnesota plus 4.5 a lot.
I love it. And I can actually get you a plus 5 now. So that's what I put in for the Pod Parlay. Very nice. I like when that happens. I'm going to go with the Baylor Bears to cover that 9.5 versus Kansas. Just think the Magic's kind of ran off on Kansas. It stinks because they're an awesome story, and they still are. Like they've already doubled their win total for the year. They can have some fun, do some cool things, but this is Baylor getting back on track at home. So bam, there's the Pod Parlay, Minnesota plus 5, and then we've got the Baylor Bears minus 9.5. That'll be a fun Saturday look for all those people out there. Do you have anything to say before we close the show?
Not too much. As always, guys, make sure to subscribe. Give us, a like. I'm always saying, hey, I know you guys got these group chats out there that are gambling group chats where you and your degenerate friends are texting each other on Saturday. Dude, who do we got today? Say, hey, I know exactly who I got because I listen to PG and Beast giving out winners all week long, baby, and just send them over the podcast. I mean, it's less than an hour every week, so send them over our winners and tell them, hey, I got these guys, man. They got hot last week. They're going to keep it hot this week, man.
That's right. Yep. Stay hot. That's the goal. Positive vibes only. We appreciate all you guys for listening. We'll be back on the recap show Tuesday morning, but we hope you have a great weekend of football. We'll catch you guys next time. Peace.
Peace out.